Brenda's laughter, sharp and bright, carried across the Rotary Club reception. Her hand rested on a man's arm, a touch too long. When her eyes met mine, a flicker of careless joy crossed her face before she turned back. "Some people just know how to make things happen," she said, loud enough for me to hear, her voice a casual dismissal. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet house, a sound usually swallowed by Brenda's music or the hum of the television. Tonight, only silence met me. My work boots thudded softly on the entry tile, a familiar rhythm. 7:15. She should have been home hours ago. A strange, hollow feeling settled in my gut, not quite dread, but a low thrum of unease. I walked through the kitchen, dropping my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. Her purse sat on the counter, a beige leather tote she'd bought last spring. I always looked for her phone beside it, a habit, an unspoken reassurance. Tonight, the spot was empty. No phone. Just the faint scent of something floral, not her usual peony. A small detail, but it snagged in my mind. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently, the hinges creaking just a little. Brenda was on the bed, propped against a stack of pillows, bathed in the blue-white glow of her phone. Her thumb moved quickly, her brow furrowed in concentration, a faint smile playing on her lips. She didn't look up until I was almost through the doorway. Her head snapped on then, her eyes widening, and with a sudden, almost violent jerk, she pulled the phone to her chest, flipping it face down. "Dale, you're home late," she said, her voice tight, a little higher than usual. A smile, quick and brittle, stretched across her face, not quite reaching her eyes. I mumbled something about a delivery truck holding up traffic on Elm Street. Long day. Old man Peterson finally decided to sign off on the Jensen order. Took 3 hours. I kicked off my boots, unbuttoning my collar. I watched her as I spoke, waiting for the familiar questions about Peterson's temper or the size of the order. She just nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible movement, her gaze drifting somewhere over my shoulder. Her hand, still clutching the phone, slipped it under the pillow beside her. The movement was practiced, smooth. Days bled into weeks. The shifts were subtle, like cracks appearing in dry earth. Our usual Friday night dinner plans at the German place, canceled with a vague, "I'm just so tired, Dale." Saturday mornings, once ours, now Brenda often had errands. She started wearing a new perfume, something musky and expensive, not the light, fresh scents she preferred. She'd apply it carefully, a dab at her wrists, behind her ears, before stepping out for these vague errands. When I asked about the scent, she just shrugged, just wanted to try something different. One Tuesday morning, I found a small overnight bag, a dark canvas one, sitting by the laundry hamper. It wasn't usually there. "What's this for?" I asked, picking it up. It felt light, almost empty. She looked up from her coffee, her eyes a little too bright. "Oh, just washing some towels. From last weekend's event, you know. They got a little damp." She waved a dismissive hand, turning back to the sink. The event had been 2 weeks ago. My mind tried to fit the pieces together, but they wouldn't quite snap. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from the quiet hum of the house. It was Mitch Hansen, a guy from work, always knew a little too much about everyone. The text read, "Heard Brenda was spotted at that new steakhouse near the harbor last night. Good food there, right?" The words hung in the air, cold and clear. I felt a prickle down my spine. Brenda had told me she was at a networking dinner downtown, vague as always. Later that week, deep in the heavy quiet of 3 in the morning, a soft glow illuminated the bedroom. Brenda lay beside me, breathing evenly. Her phone, no longer under the pillow, was on the nightstand. The screen lit up again, a new message. My eyes, still blurry from sleep, focused on the name, Todd. And then the words, "Miss you, same time tomorrow." A cold wave washed over me. I wanted to reach out, to touch the screen, to read more, but before I could, Brenda stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw the phone, saw me looking at it. Her hand shot out, snatching the device as if it were a burning coal. "Just a vendor mix-up," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep and something else. "Old client, they always mess up the schedule." She clutched the phone to her chest, her back now to me. The next evening at the dinner table, I pushed the words out. "How was that client meeting yesterday? The one you mentioned with the meltdown client?" I watched her face, tried to keep mine neutral. She paused, her fork hovering over her plate. Oh, it was fine, just some venue issues. At the old riverfront grill, you know. She stammered, then corrected herself. No, not the riverfront. It was at the new place near the harbor. The Steakhouse. Her eyes darted away, then back, a flicker of panic in them. My gut churned. It wasn't a mix-up. It was a lie. The pieces, sharp and unforgiving, were finally falling into place. A cold, creeping suspicion, solid and heavy, settled into my bones. An affair. The word resonated in the silence of the room, a chilling confirmation of every unsettling detail. I met Mitch at the diner on Main Street, my usual booth near the window. The air hung thick with the smell of brewing coffee and fried potatoes. Mitch, leaning across the Formica table, stirred his cream into his cup. His eyes, usually sharp, held a casual, almost absent-minded gleam. We talked about work for a while, the usual grumbling about quotas and clients. Then he shifted. Say, Dale, he began, picking at a loose thread on his napkin. Saw Brenda the other night. Wednesday, I think, over by that new steakhouse near the harbor. She was really dressed up. Fancy, you know? He looked at me, a polite smile on his face. You two have a nice time? The lukewarm coffee in my mug tasted like ash. I felt a sudden coldness spread through my chest. Wednesday. Brenda had said she was at a networking dinner. I remembered the new perfume. No, that wasn't me, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. I worked late. A deep certainty settled in my gut, heavier than any emotion. This wasn't a mistake. This was a confirmation. A quiet, undeniable betrayal. At home, the phone started ringing more often. Unknown numbers. Brenda would glance at the screen, a fleeting expression crossing her face. Something akin to impatience, or perhaps apprehension. She would let it ring, sometimes 3 or 4 times, before silencing it. They can wait, she'd murmur, dismissing it with a wave of her hand. Her reasons varied. Probably a telemarketer, or someone from work. I'll get back to them later. But she never did. The phone lay on the nightstand sometimes, within arm's reach. My hand would twitch, an involuntary movement, a craving to pick it up, to look. A profound conflict churned inside me. It felt dirty, an invasion, a violation of something sacred, even if that sacredness was already broken. I would clench my jaw, breathe in slowly, and pull my hand back. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Not without a firmer reason, a greater justification. I logged into our joint bank account, something I did monthly to balance the budget. The recent transactions scrolled down the screen. Grocery stores, gas stations, utility bills. Then a series of smaller withdrawals clustered together over the past few weeks from places I didn't recognize. The Bridal Nook, Celebration Decor, Party Provisions Palace. Each one listed under wedding supplies. The amounts weren't huge, $20 here, $40 there, but the pattern was undeniable. Wedding supplies. For what? That evening, I laid the printout on the kitchen table after dinner. Brenda was clearing plates. What are these for? I asked, tapping the paper. Wedding supplies? We aren't planning a wedding. She paused, a plate in her hand. Her eyes darted to the paper, then quickly away, avoiding mine. Oh, those, she said, her voice a little too casual. Just some things for the big charity gala I'm organizing, for the Riverfront Alliance. To raise money for the park revitalization. She offered a quick, bright smile. I'll get you the receipts, I promise. They're just mixed in with all the other project stuff. I nodded slowly, watching her. The Riverfront Alliance was a legitimate local group, but a big charity gala. I spent some time online, searching their website, local event calendars, even the community newspaper archives. Nothing. No mention of a gala, no upcoming fundraisers of that scale. I called a couple of people I knew on the Alliance board, casually asking about their current projects. They talked about smaller cleanup drives, but nothing about a major fundraising event. The silence was deafening. A few days later, while waiting for Brenda to finish at the grocery store, I was cleaning out the accumulated clutter in her car console, receipts, old parking stubs, loose change. My fingers brushed against something hard, thin. I pulled it out. a plastic key card. It was cream-colored with a small black stripe and a faded logo, the Riverfront Hotel. My heart gave a little jolt. Later that afternoon, from my work phone, I made an anonymous call to the Riverfront Hotel. My voice felt tight, unfamiliar. "I'm calling about an event," I began, trying to sound casual, like a potential attendee. "I heard there might be a charity gala or something big coming up, maybe with the Riverfront Alliance." The woman on the other end, polite but firm, confirmed there were no such events scheduled. A prickle of shame ran through me. A bitter taste. I was reduced to this, to prying, to deceit. Back at my desk, I opened my browser. Todd, that name from Brenda's phone. I typed it into the search bar, adding local event photographer, a hunch guiding my fingers. The results came up quickly. A sleek website, a professional headshot, a portfolio filled with smiling couples, vibrant party scenes. His social media profile confirmed it. Todd Miller, event photography. I clicked through his photos, recognizing a few local landmarks. A deep, cold pit formed in my stomach. The pieces were no longer just falling. They were snapping into place. Too neatly. The confirmation was almost unbearable. This wasn't just a crush or a fleeting flirtation. This was calculated. This was a plan. I closed the laptop, the screen reflecting my own grim face. I needed more. Irrefutable proof. Not just texts or bank statements, but something concrete, undeniable. A plan began to solidify in my mind, cold and precise. The Tuesday afternoon sky was a uniform gray pressing down on the town. My truck idled a block from the Riverfront Hotel, the engine a low hum against the stillness. I watched the entrance, my hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white. An hour passed, then another. The air in the cab grew stale. Just as I considered giving up, a familiar silver sedan pulled into the parking lot. Brenda. She stepped out, dressed in a sleek navy blue dress I hadn't seen before, her hair meticulously styled, the expensive perfume faintly reaching me even at this distance. She looked different. Not my Brenda, but someone sharper, more polished. She walked towards the hotel entrance, a small clutch bag in her hand. Then he appeared. Todd. He was taller than I'd pictured, with an easy smile that crinkled his eyes. He reached for her hand, a gesture both familiar and possessive, and she didn't pull away. They exchanged a few words, their heads close, a silent intimacy passing between them. My breath caught in my throat. I watched them walk into the lobby, then disappear towards the elevators. A few minutes later, the light in a third-floor window flickered on. The third floor. My stomach clenched. It was a physical blow, a sudden, sharp pain that left me winded. There it was, the irrefutable proof. Not just a text, not just a vague sighting, but this. The image of them, walking together, entering that building, entering that room. The infidelity, undeniable, brutally clear. I drove home slowly, the world outside the truck blurring into an indistinguishable wash of colors. The house, when I finally entered it, felt vast and empty. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall was an accusation. I sat on the couch, not turning on any lights, just letting the dim twilight filter through the windows. Numbness spread through me, a chilling insulation against the raw pain that threatened to surface. I waited. For her, for the inevitable. It was almost 10 when Brenda's sedan pulled into the driveway. I heard the soft click of her heels on the walkway, the faint jingle of her keys. The door opened. "Dale?" she called out, her voice a little too bright, a little too strained. "You're still up?" She walked into the living room, paused, and her eyes avoided mine in the dim light. "Long day, just exhausted." I stood up slowly, the movement feeling heavy and deliberate. I walked into the kitchen, flipped on the overhead light. The stark fluorescent glow illuminated the counter. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the cream-colored key card, and placed it carefully on the cool granite. It sat there, small and innocuous, yet radiating a terrible power. "What's this, Brenda?" My voice was low, steady, a stranger's voice. She froze. Her eyes, wide with sudden panic, fixated on the card. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale and stark in the harsh light. Her lips parted, then closed. It's nothing, Dale." The words were barely a whisper. I stepped closer, my gaze unyielding. "I saw you, Brenda. The words felt like stones leaving my mouth. With Todd at the hotel, the Riverfront Hotel. I watched her, watched the last vestiges of her composure crumble. Her shoulders began to shake. A sound, a choked sob, escaped her. Then the tears came, a sudden desperate torrent streaming down her face. "Oh, Dale, I'm so sorry. It's not what you think, it's a mistake." Her voice was muffled, broken, a tangled mess of regret and fear. I felt a cold, hard knot in my chest. "What do I think, Brenda?" I kept my voice even, refusing to rise to her desperation. "That my wife of 8 years, the mother of our children, is having a secret life? Is that not what you think I should be thinking?" She stumbled forward, reaching for my arm, but I instinctively pulled back. "It was just a few times, Dale. I swear. It meant nothing. He's just a client, a mistake. I don't know why it happened." Her words were a desperate scramble, minimizing, deflecting. A wave of nausea washed over me. The world seemed to tilt, the kitchen walls pressing in. A few times meant nothing. The sheer audacity, the casual dismissal of all we had. "Is that all you can say, Brenda? After all of this?" She sank to her knees, her head bowed, her body racked with sobs. "Please, Dale. Please forgive me. I'll end it. I swear I'll never see him again. It was stupid. I love you, Dale. I love our family. Please, don't let this ruin us, please." Her pleas filled the silent kitchen, desperate and raw. The couch in the living room was too short, the cushions lumpy. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the familiar sounds of the house amplified in the silence. Brenda's muffled sobs from the bedroom eventually faded. I couldn't bring myself to share the bed with her. The thought of her beside me, after what I had seen, after what she had admitted, was an unbearable weight. The cold realism of the situation settled over me like a shroud. The next morning, the air in the kitchen was thick with unspoken words. Brenda sat at the table, her eyes red-rimmed, her coffee untouched. I watched her, my own coffee, growing cold in my hands. "Tell me," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Tell me everything." Slowly, haltingly, she began to speak. Details emerged, small admissions that chipped away at the image I had held of her. How they met at a vendor fair, how he had paid her compliments, how he had understood her. "He made me feel seen, Dale," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the tabletop. "Like I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's mother. I felt neglected, unappreciated." She spoke of loneliness, of needing something more. I listened, the words like small cuts. Neglected, unappreciated. "Brenda," I finally said, my voice rising slightly, "we built this life together. Remember the late nights, the second rounds, the financial stress when we first bought the house? My efforts, my constant providing. Where was I neglecting you then? We talked about it. We were supposed to be a team. We always shared the struggles. The struggles were mine too. My efforts to provide, to keep our heads above water, suddenly felt worthless, dismissed. Then came the bank statements. I laid them out again, the wedding supplies purchases glaring up at us. "These," I said, pointing, "what were these really for?" Her shoulders sagged. "Dates," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Gifts for him and the hotel rooms." Each word was a fresh stab, not just a casual mistake. This was planned, funded, deliberate. A profound sense of betrayal washed over me, deeper than just her physical infidelity. It was a betrayal of our shared history, our future, the very foundation of our trust. Later that week, Mitch stopped by ostensibly to drop off some paperwork from work. He walked into the strained silence of our house, sensed the tension immediately. Brenda had gone out, claiming an urgent meeting. His eyes, usually cheerful, were serious as he watched me. "Everything all right, Dale?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated, then the words came tumbling out, raw and broken. I told him everything. The hotel, the texts, the lies. Mitch listened, his face hardening with each detail. "Damn it, Dale," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She's really done a number on you. You need to protect yourself, man. This isn't just a mistake." His anger felt like a small, unexpected comfort. A restless energy consumed me. The conversation with Mitch, the lingering feeling of incompleteness despite Brenda's admissions, pushed me on. I remembered her casual dismissal of calls from unknown numbers, her quick snatching of the phone. There was something more. It gnawed at me. I searched methodically, quietly, like a detective in my own home. Behind a loose brick in the fireplace, a place she used to hide spare cash, I found it. A small, cheap burner phone. Dark, nondescript. My hands trembled as I powered it on. The screen flickered to life, revealing a torrent of messages, emails. Not just from Todd, but other numbers, other names, dates, times I expressions of longing, of a deeper emotional connection than she had ever admitted. I miss you, darling. Counting down the minutes until I can see you again. I can't imagine my life without you now. They stretched back months, a parallel existence she had meticulously crafted, shielded from me. This wasn't just a few times. This was a full-blown relationship. She returned an hour later, her face a mask of practiced regret. I met her in the living room, the burner phone heavy in my hand. I held it up, the screen still glowing faintly. Her eyes widened, her jaw dropping. The color drained from her face again, leaving her ashen. Any remaining hope, any small ember of belief in her explanations, shattered. "Brenda," I said, my voice flat, devoid of anger, just an aching emptiness. "You didn't just lie to me. You made a fool of me. You built a whole other life right under my nose." The words were a quiet judgment, a final, unyielding statement of the undeniable truth. Brenda moved her things into the guest room the next day. The house, once filled with the comfortable sounds of a shared life, now held a suffocating silence. It became a battlefield of unspoken words, each creak of the floorboards, each door closing, a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. We lived under the same roof, yet miles apart. I made an appointment with Mr. Schmidt, a divorce lawyer known in town for his no-nonsense approach. His office, filled with stacks of files and the scent of old paper, felt sterile. He listened patiently, his gaze direct and unblinking, as I laid out the bare facts. The hotel, the burner phone, the lies. He nodded, making notes. "This will be complicated, Daleman," he said, his voice gravelly. "We'll need to account for everything. Asset division, alimony, especially the financial implications of her expenditures. It's not just the emotional cost, but the tangible one." He explained the process, the inevitable paperwork, the timeline. It was overwhelming, a new kind of burden. Later, sitting at my desk, I pulled up the bank statements again. The charity gala had been a lie, a carefully constructed cover story. The wedding supplies weren't for any grand event, but for a secret life, for dates, for gifts to Todd, for hotel rooms where my wife entertained another man. The cold reality of it settled deep. The financial drain wasn't just a few $100s. It was a steady, insidious bleed on our savings, money we'd earmarked for the kids' college, for our retirement. Every dollar spent on that charade was a direct attack on our shared future. I began the arduous process of separating finances, something I never imagined doing. Changing passwords, reviewing statements line by line, moving funds. Each action was a small, deliberate severing of a tie, a recognition that the life we had built was coming undone. The weight of responsibility for myself, for the children, pressed down. The nights became a blur of staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed conversations, snippets of Brenda's laughter, her forced smiles, her casual dismissals. Every memory was tainted, every shared moment now suspect. I doubted everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about her, about myself. Brenda tried to talk sometimes. She'd stand in the doorway of the living room, her voice soft, pleading. "Dale, can we just talk? I can explain. It was a dark time for me." But her words rang hollow, stripped of all credibility by the burner phone, by the depth of her deception. I had heard the explanations. They weren't enough. One evening my phone rang. It was my mother. "Dale, you sound quiet. Everything all right?" Parents always knew. I could hear the concern in her voice, in my father's quiet murmur in the background. I hesitated, then the dam broke. I told them. Everything. The raw truth, stripped bare. There was a stunned silence on the other end, then my mother's soft gasp. "Oh, Dale, I'm so sorry, honey." My father's voice, usually gruff, was unusually gentle. "We're here for you, son, whatever you need." Their shock, their sadness for me, was a tangible thing, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. Lying in the short, uncomfortable bed in the guest room, the decision solidified. The trust was broken beyond repair. The foundation of our marriage, built on honesty and shared dreams, had crumbled. There was no mending this. It was time. I would file for divorce. The thought brought a strange mix of relief and a terrible, aching loneliness. The familiar walls of our home, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of the neighborhood children playing, all of it felt alien now, a hollow echo of a life that was no longer mine. Life's choices, especially the costly ones, often unravel in ways we never foresee. Stick around to the end to see how Dale navigates the wreckage of his. The small town, like any other, had its own circulatory system of gossip. Once the divorce papers were filed, the whispers began. They started as low hums in grocery store aisles, then grew louder over coffee at the diner. Word of Dale and Brenda's separation, and the underlying reason, spread through the community like spilled ink on a clean tablecloth. Everyone knew, or thought they knew. Brenda's wedding planning business, which she'd built with meticulous care over years, began to suffer. Whispers turned into direct inquiries, then into canceled contracts. I heard snippets of conversations in passing. Can you believe it? With her planning weddings? Her carefully curated image as a purveyor of happily ever afters was crumbling, piece by painful piece. At work, colleagues approached my desk, some with averted eyes, murmuring platitudes about tough times. Others, the few genuine ones, offered a firm hand on the shoulder or a quiet, "How are you holding up, Dale?" The awkwardness hung heavy in the air, a visible barrier between my old life and this new shattered one. Each sympathetic glance was a reminder of my public humiliation. The inevitable came a few weeks later at the annual Riverfront Fall Festival. It was a crisp Saturday, usually a day of community and laughter. I was there with Mitch, trying to pretend normalcy, when a commotion erupted near the main stage. A woman's voice, sharp with fury, cut through the cheerful hubbub. It was Carol, Todd's wife. She stood directly in front of Brenda, who had been chatting with a former client. Carol's face was red, contorted with rage. Her finger pointed directly at Brenda's chest. "You," she shrieked, loud enough for a dozen people to turn their heads. "You home wrecker. You slept with my husband, didn't you? While your own husband was working himself to death." The words hung in the stunned silence, brutal and undeniable. Brenda flinched, her face paling, then turning a mottled red. She tried to mumble something, but Carol wasn't finished. "Don't you dare deny it. I have the proof. He admitted it. You ruined my family." The scene unfolded in slow motion, a public spectacle of raw, unfiltered anger. People quickly formed a circle, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity. Brenda, cornered, eventually turned and fled, disappearing into the crowd. I watched it all, a strange mix of grim satisfaction and deep sadness churning within me. The dominoes were falling one by one, each one a life shattered. Todd, too, faced immediate repercussions. His social media, once brimming with his photography, went silent. Clients, couples who had hired him to capture their happiest moments, began canceling. His reputation, built on trust and a keen eye, evaporated almost overnight. In a small town, a scandal like this clung like a burr. Despite the vindication, I found it hard to focus. At work, my mind drifted, replaying conversations, re-examining gestures, trying to find the precise moment when everything changed. The past months felt like a separate life, one I was only now truly understanding. My performance suffered. My boss, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office, expressing concern but not directly mentioning the elephant in the room. Brenda's isolation became palpable. Her social circle, once vibrant, shrank to almost nothing. Former friends, women she'd known for years, now avoided her gaze at the grocery store. The judgment, unspoken but heavy, weighed on her. She walked with a slight stoop, her shoulders hunched, a shadow of her former self. I started attending a support group for divorced men at the community center. The fluorescent lights hummed, the coffee was stale, But in that room, surrounded by other men navigating similar wreckage, I found a strange kind of solace. Shared experiences, quiet nods of understanding, the raw honesty of men who had lost everything. It helped, a little. The reality of my new life, one without Brenda, one I had never wanted, began to sink in with crushing finality. The quiet house, the empty side of the bed, the missing laughter. It was a life I was forced into, defined by her choices, not mine. The immense emotional damage, a silent wound, throbbed with every passing day. The divorce negotiations quickly devolved into a bitter fight. The initial attempts at civility vanished, replaced by a ruthless scramble for assets. Our house, the one we'd poured years of sweat and savings into, became the primary battleground. Brenda, through her own lawyer, argued for a larger share, referencing our long marriage, our children, our shared history, as if those years hadn't been poisoned by her deception. Mr. Schmidt, my lawyer, sat across from me in his office, his expression firm. "She's trying to play the victim, Dale, but we have the proof of her actions. Don't let her sentimental arguments sway you. Stand firm. This isn't about feelings anymore. It's about a fair division based on facts." His words were a cold, necessary truth. Adding another layer of complexity, Todd's own divorce proceedings from Carol began around the same time. The animosity from that situation, fueled by public humiliation and shattered trust, seemed to spill over into ours, making everything more toxic. It was a ripple effect of Brenda's choices, now consuming multiple lives. The house. It wasn't just a structure, it was every memory. The children's growth charts on the pantry door, the uneven paint job in the living room I'd done myself, the garden Brenda had cultivated. Selling it felt like tearing out a piece of myself. The decision weighed on me, heavy and suffocating. Yet, I knew it had to be done. It was no longer a home for us. Brenda's messages started coming, unsettling in their inconsistency. One day, a text filled with remorse, begging for forgiveness, claiming she missed our family. The next, an email laced with anger, accusing me of being heartless, of ruining her life. The whiplash was disorienting, a cruel reminder of the instability she had brought into our lives. The legal battle dragged on, a relentless grind. Each bill from Mr. Schmidt was a fresh wound, each document to review another drain on my already depleted emotional reserves. It felt like I was spending every waking moment either working to pay for the divorce or dealing with the divorce itself. The light at the end of the tunnel seemed to recede further with each passing week. Mitch became a steadfast presence. He'd show up at my door unannounced with a casserole or a lasagna, a six-pack of beer, and just sit with me. No preachy advice, just quiet companionship. "You gotta eat, Dale," he'd say, placing a plate in front of me. His presence, his unwavering support, was a quiet comfort in the storm. Then came the calls, unwanted, unknown numbers. It was Todd. He'd leave cryptic voicemails, sometimes apologetic, sometimes defensive, sometimes just drunken ramblings. It was another layer of intrusion, another sign that his life too was spiraling. I considered a restraining order. I talked to Mr. Schmidt about it, the idea of having to go to court again. For this, feeling utterly exhausting. The court hearings themselves were a public ordeal. Each session meant revisiting the painful memories, detailing the affair, listening to Brenda's lawyer paint her as a sympathetic figure, caught in a moment of weakness. She'd sit across the room, her demeanor hardening with each passing week, portraying herself as a victim of circumstances, not the architect of her own destruction. Her eyes, once pleading, now held a cold, resolute glint. I sat there listening, watching, an overwhelming sense of injustice burning within me. The judge, the lawyers, they spoke of legal definitions, of equitable division. But where was the accountability for the years of lies? For the shattered trust? For the emotional damage? I wanted more than just a division of assets. I wanted her to truly acknowledge the consequences, the ruin she had left in her wake. The judge's gavel fell with a dull thud, signaling the end. The divorce was finalized. I walked out of the courthouse feeling both hollow and strangely light. I had the house, as Mr. Schmidt had fought hard for, but it came with a heavy financial burden. The legal fees, the diminished savings, it was a steep price. Brenda moved out 2 weeks later. Her car, packed tight with her remaining belongings, pulled out of the driveway without a backward glance. She disappeared from the local social scene, her wedding planning business effectively ruined. The rumors I heard later suggested she had moved out of state, seeking a fresh start where her past wasn't a constant shadow. Todd, too, was gone. His professional life in town had become untenable. Without clients, without a reputation, he couldn't find work. His social media, once active, had vanished completely. The whispers suggested he'd packed up and left, leaving behind his own shattered marriage and career. The silence from both of them was profound, a definitive end. The house was mine now, all mine. The silence that had once felt oppressive slowly began to shift. I started the arduous process of healing, of rebuilding a life I never wanted, brick by brick. There was no grand revelation, no sudden burst of joy, just a slow, deliberate picking up of pieces. I threw myself into work, embracing the long hours, the tangible results of my efforts. Concrete projects, spreadsheets, the predictable rhythm of the office. It offered a measure of stability, a distraction from the chaos inside my head. The focus on what I could control became a lifeline. My friends and family rallied around me. Mitch continued to be a constant presence, inviting me over for poker nights, dragging me out for fishing trips. My parents called regularly, offering not just emotional support but practical help too. My mother would drop off meals, my father would help with yard work, their quiet presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. I started to clear out the house. Brenda's clothes, her trinkets, the decor she had chosen. I sold most of it off, piece by piece, at garage sales or through online listings. Each item gone was a small, symbolic act, clearing out the past, making space for something new. The house slowly began to feel less like a shared tomb and more like my own. There were moments of profound loneliness, especially in the evenings when the children were asleep and the house grew quiet. The empty space on the other side of the bed was a gaping void. But amidst that loneliness, I also found flashes of unexpected freedom. The freedom to choose my own schedule, to decorate as I pleased, to simply exist without the constant tension, the unspoken lies. Brenda reached out occasionally, texts usually, sometimes an email. Apologies, expressions of regret, thinly veiled attempts to reconnect. I kept my distance. My responses were polite, brief, factual. There was nothing left to say. The wound was too deep, the trust too thoroughly destroyed. I grappled with the concept of forgiveness, not for her sake, but for mine. Could I truly move past this without it? I realized it wasn't a destination, not a single decision, but a journey, a slow, painful untangling of resentment and anger. It would take time, perhaps a lifetime. The weight of the pay the price theme became undeniably clear. Brenda had paid with her reputation, her business, her home. Todd had paid with his career, his marriage, his standing in the community. And I too had paid, with my marriage, my peace of mind, a significant portion of my savings. The consequences for all involved arrived were severe and lasting. Seeking meaning beyond the pain, I started volunteering at the local community center, helping with after-school programs. The children's laughter, their simple needs, their unfiltered joy, it was a balm, a reminder that there was still good in the world, still a future to build, still a purpose to find. Months turned into a year. The divorce decree, once a heavy document, now sat filed away, a stark marker of time. I had thrown myself into renovating the house, stripping away the layers of shared history. The wallpaper Brenda had picked came down. The paint colors changed. The old floral patterns replaced with muted, earthy tones. It wasn't erasing her, but rather making the space mine, shedding the emotional residue of old memories. Each hammer blow, each stroke of paint was a quiet act of reclaiming. I started dating again, slowly, cautiously. A woman from the community center, a librarian named Sarah, caught my eye. Our first coffee felt awkward, our second a little less so. The conversations were light, but beneath the surface, a wariness lingered. Trust, once freely given, was now something to be earned, tested, scrutinized. I found myself looking for inconsistencies, for any hint of the secrecy I had once missed. It was a new landscape full of trepidation. As the raw pain subsided, a quieter reflection began. I thought about the morality of Brenda's choices, the gradual slide into deception, the calculated lies. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the fundamental erosion of honesty. I learned, in the hardest way possible, the profound value of integrity, of transparency. The affair, devastating as it was, had forced me to grow, to define my own values more clearly. It had stripped away the comfortable illusions and left me with a stark, unvarnished truth about myself and what I truly needed in a partner. Then, a letter arrived. The handwriting was Brenda's, but it was addressed from an unfamiliar town, miles away. I opened it slowly. It was long, handwritten, filled with remorse. She acknowledged the full extent of her wrongdoing, the pain she had caused, the price she had paid. No excuses, no deflections, just a raw, unvarnished admission of guilt and regret. She spoke of her own loneliness, her misguided search for validation, and the profound sorrow of losing our family. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. A strange feeling washed over me, a quiet release. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, perhaps never in the way she might hope, but it was an understanding, an acknowledgement that she too had suffered, that the consequences had touched her deeply. I knew with a quiet certainty that true reconciliation was not possible, that the bridge was burned beyond repair. But her words offered a finality, a closure I hadn't known I needed. A sense of peace began to settle within me. The anger that had once simmered, the hurt that had consumed me, slowly receded. It wasn't gone entirely, but it no longer defined me. It was replaced by a quiet understanding, a profound acceptance of what was. Mitch remained a steadfast presence, a constant reminder of loyalty, of resilience, of the simple power of true friendship. We'd still meet for coffee, still fish the quiet streams, his presence a comforting anchor. I saw the open road ahead, scarred but stronger. The experience had marked me, left indelible imprints on my heart and mind. I acknowledged that while wounds can heal, scars remain. They were reminders of a life irrevocably changed, of lessons learned, of battles fought and survived. But they were also symbols of my endurance, of a capacity to rebuild, to move forward. I was ready for whatever came next, not with naive optimism, but with a quiet, grounded strength. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Midwestern sky in hues of orange and purple. I sat on my porch, a quiet acceptance in my gaze, watching the last light fade. The weight of the past was still there, a familiar presence, but it no longer crushed me. Instead, alongside it was the fragile yet persistent hope of a new, authentic future.